I worked in a dull office during the day, but as the sun began to set, I became a pizza delivery man, zipping through the streets on my dependable bicycle. Even though my evening gig was only for a few hours, one particular night would have a lasting impact on my mental health. That fateful evening, the order led me away from the main roads and into a remote area where the concrete jungle of the city gave way to an eerie wilderness. Unusual directions were given for the delivery. Go through the gate, head to the front door, and then proceed to the kitchen. I dismissed a growing unease, reasoning that it was just a peculiar client. A rundown house that stood ominously on the outskirts of town was visible as I got closer to my destination. It was surrounded by an unsettling aura and looked as though it had been standing there for centuries. I had to get the pizza delivered despite my growing discomfort. I noticed a movement in a window, like a shadow that appeared for a moment and then disappeared. I explained the strange occurrence away as being due to fatigue and continued on. My entrance was simple because of the front gate's slight opening. I felt as though I had entered a set of a horror movie as a door creaked open with an unsettling beep. No one responded to my hesitant calls, and the inside of the house was completely dark. I followed a lengthy, ominous hallway deeper into the pitch blackness, the feeling of foreboding growing more intense. I walked to the kitchen through an open door, set the pizza box there carefully, and called out again. Except for the echo of my own voice, there was total silence. My instinct screamed that something was wrong, and I tightened my hold on the pizza box. The front door slammed shut with an abrupt bang that reverberated through the entire house. I ran back to the entrance after jumping, my heart racing, but nobody was there. Although it appeared to be a wind-related illusion, the unease persisted. With adrenaline pumping through my veins, I sprinted to my bicycle and started pedaling. I turned my head to the side and noticed the eerie silhouette of the shadowy figure still lurking in the window. I told my boss about my terrifying experience when I got back to the pizza shop, and he skeptically gave me the night off. He insisted nothing actually happened. Let's not bother the police, shall we? However, I was unable to erase the unsettling experience from my memory. It played back in my head night after night, a mysterious riddle I was unable to crack. I finally decided to go back to the house during the daytime because curiosity won out over fear. The home had lost all signs of the eerie atmosphere from the previous evening and appeared perfectly normal during the day. This time, the lights were on, so I plucked up the courage to ring the doorbell. A seemingly normal woman opened the door, and her bewildered expression matched mine. She claimed they hadn't placed a recent pizza order when I questioned her about it. As I described my strange experience, a shiver went down my spine. As we tried to make sense of the bizarre events, her fear mirrored mine. I had a lot of questions as I was leaving the house. As I pedaled away, I couldn't help but think about the mysteries that lay beneath the surface of the ordinary world. Who or what had played that bizarre prank on me? What was the enigmatic figure in the window? I would think twice before making another pizza delivery to the forest's edge. That much was certain. My previous job was in a restaurant where any requests for food were immediately granted, and our delivery service was nothing short of extraordinary. Our deliveries were fancier than the usual fare, which helped us gain a devoted following. When we were about to close the kitchen, at our strict 10 p.m. cutoff one fateful night, an order came through that was supposed to be the night's showpiece. I prepared myself, prepared the meal, and left. The delivery address, hidden down a strange, empty street, was a mystery. The house number didn't match any of the houses I could see as I was driving, I realized. Until my phone rang loudly and startled me, my frustration grew. "Follow the lit path behind the last house," a commanding voice said on the other end. Before I could finish, they abruptly hung up, leaving me clinging to the food bag like a lifeline. I stumbled. "Hello?" The spooky path leading from the shadows is the only source of light. I cautiously stepped onto it, my heart racing. A man was standing in front of the small house down the path. I reasoned that he might be a hungry customer, even though something about his demeanor raised red flags. I approached cautiously and kept a close eye on him. Panic erupted in my veins as he subsequently lunged at me like a crazed animal. Without stopping, I threw down the food and ran away. I could see my car in the distance, so I sped over to it while trying to avoid the man's ferocious, insane eyes. As I sped off, fear clung to my tongue, but he didn't follow me. I kept my distance from the strange encounter and gathered my thoughts. I explained it away by saying it was stress and adrenaline, and I wrote it off as a strange practical joke to get free food. For $20, I wasn't going to risk my life. I told my boss about the unsettling incident once I got back to the restaurant. He was puzzled as well, but he didn't brush it off. He dialed the police and told them the strange tale of the failed delivery. Anxiety was eating away at me as I waited for the police. What if the man's motivations went beyond receiving a free meal? The man had disappeared, according to the police when they eventually arrived. As an unsettling reminder, only the untouched food bag was left. I began to doubt my sanity and wondered if I had really been facing danger or if it had all been a dream. I had an unsettling realization late one night. The man hadn't wanted food. He had sought something else entirely. My stomach turned, and I experienced a shiver. It seemed as though the darkness had a keen interest in my life, and whatever had happened that night was far from over. Even though it occurred a little over a year ago, thinking about it still sends a shiver up my spine. I used to deliver food for a Chinese restaurant, which frequently required me to travel through the city after midnight. The occasional tip made it worthwhile despite the long hours and low pay. All of a sudden, one eerie night, everything changed. It seemed odd to make such a late-night request for 6 spring rolls. On the strange online purchase, it was written 23. I couldn't understand it, but I figured it might be an internal code. I rode my dependable bicycle through the dark streets, carrying the spring rolls. Using the address, I was able to locate a remote area outside of town. An old rundown hotel stood in eerie silence. The building smelled of disrepair, and the broken windows hardly let in any moonlight. I had to have the money, despite how uncomfortable it made me feel. My steps down a squeaky hallway to where I left my bike added to the eerie silence. I was searching for room number 23. My fist clanged against a wooden door, but silence greeted me instead. The same reaction was elicited by a second, louder and more agitated knock. I stood there with my heart pounding, more terrified. There was silence until a raspy voice said, "Please enter." The words are hard for me to hear because my heart was beating so quickly, but they still made me shiver all over. A room that was dark and dusty was revealed when I pushed open the door, with shaking hands gripping the doorknob. Only one table, which was heavily dusted, was visible when I looked around the room. I struggled with the absurd situation, confused and afraid at the same time. Who had made those remarks, and where was the client? I had to get away because of the growing fear I was feeling. I shut the door behind me after leaving the room. I debated doing more research when I got back to the restaurant, but ultimately I opted against it. Who could tolerate such an unusual encounter? Following that evening, my life took a terrible turn. My nightmares were caused by the image of the pitch-black room and the eerie whisper. I had trouble understanding what had happened. Every time I drove by an old hotel, my neck continued to itch. I eventually stopped working as a delivery person because of the persistent feeling that something strange had followed me. I still get the chills thinking about that terrible night, the night I gave birth in room 23. Even now, I'm unsure of whether or not I'll ever be able to get over that terrifying experience.